Wolfram's here, so we can get started. So jobs to be done is not a design technique per se. I think that's a misconception that some folks have. Although jobs to be done can help with tactical design choices, it's really about finding strategic differentiated value. If you look at the history of jobs to be done and where it came from the business community. What they were trying to understand are what are the unmet needs in the market that they should be pointing their business at a strategic level. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the relationship of jobs to be done and strategy. So welcome everyone to Jobs to be Done Untangled. My name is Jim Callback. I'm the author of the Jobs to be Done Playbook and co-founder of the Jobs to be Done Toolkit.
And I'm Elaine Mathias. I'm the other co-founder. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go over a couple of quick just rules of the road, what to expect from this event, and then share a couple of upcoming events that we want to draw attention to. So we keep things pretty informal. We have a special guest today that Jim will introduce in a moment. And then towards the second half of the hour, we'll just accept Q&A, mostly in the chat. So if you have a question, post it there. And then what I'll do is I'll put it in queue, and then you can come on stage and talk to Beat and Jim, or respond to whatever you're hearing. So we do encourage participation.
Yep. Sounds good. What's coming up, Elaine?
So just make a note of our August 27th Untangled. So that'll be the last Tuesday in August. And then I just wanted to let everyone know that you can catch the past events on YouTube. So we have an Untangled playlist if you want to hear from past speakers. And then lastly, if you're really interested and you want to do a deep dive into jobs to be done, check out our Foundations course, which introduces all of the basics and what we think is the fastest and easiest way to get started with jobs to be done.
Right.
Hi, Jim.
You can put those links in the chat or something like that, but I'm going to move right along. He's here, waiting, ready to go. Beat Walther, welcome to Jobs to be Done Untangled, Beat.
Hi, Jim. Great pleasure to be here.
Right. Yeah, well, of course, we've had Jan on the show from Vendbridge, but you're also the founder and leader of Vendbridge, right? Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do at Vendbridge.
Yeah, Vendbridge is a boutique consultancy helping corporates mainly and also startup companies to grow. I have founded this after an experience I had pre-Vendbridge. I was working in consumer goods in Procter & Gamble, and in consumer goods, it is so important to differentiate products because the products from the technology are really exchangeable. And the way to differentiate is via unmet needs. And I never found this afterwards. And then I created Vendbridge as the bridge between the customer and products, or customer and companies. And that's a bit what we do. So we help companies to accelerate growth. That can be Horizon 1, fast sales growth, can be Horizon 2, more strategic marketing, product development, or even Horizon 3 innovation.
Right. That's great. And you're based in Zurich, Switzerland, correct? Where it's very warm today, I hear.
Yeah. We're based in Zurich. We do a lot of projects in Europe. Okay. Thanks to COVID, we are really working internationally. We have clients in the US. We have even a client in Australia. Very interesting. COVID was really for us also an innovation boost and helped us a lot.
Excellent. So Beat, I stopped sharing my screen and I invite you to share a few words with us. I know you have some slides to share.
Shall I share?
Yeah, you can share your screen and just share those slides. That'd be great.
Yeah, I made it very simple because it's really a discussion. It's like, as I said, I worked in Procter. Afterwards, I worked in strategic management consultancy, and we did a lot of work on strategy at the time. And what I found afterwards, when we got into jobs to be done, which by the way is like 20 years ago, we discovered jobs to be done 20 years ago. As a framework. And what I really found is that this term strategy is fuzzy. Everyone uses the term in a different way. It's really a fuzzy thing, and I was looking for definitions, and one of the definitions that I was always using was what we used in McKinsey, which is basically a handful of decisions to reach a goal. That's a very simple definition of strategy. That's why I thought I put a handful, which is like 5 decisions that you take in strategy. We found a very nice definition of strategy from Roger Martin. Roger Martin is a management coach, management strategist, and he says strategy is a set of choices to compel customers to spend their money at your company. Very interesting definition, but he also says a set of choices to compel customers to spend the money at your company. So it's really about value generation, and it's about decisions that are fundamental for a business. Like, for example, what customers do you want to serve? In which markets you want to play? How do you want to serve these customers or these markets? With products or with services? Against whom do you compete, really? And other things like external forces. How do you react to regulations, for example? So it's really these fundamental questions which define almost the purpose of a business. And the question is, how can jobs to be done really help in this? We believe jobs to be done can really help to frame these fundamental questions by asking what jobs do the customers of my business really try to fulfill? What jobs in their life or in their business do they try to fulfill? And by asking the question that way, it opens up options for product development, it opens up options for innovation, even for sales and marketing. I mean, the basic of jobs to be done, the idea started in the 60s with an article of Ted Levitt. So he's a business person. Ted Levitt was a marketing professor at Harvard, and he wrote an article which is very interesting, which is called Marketing Myopia. And Marketing Myopia was saying the basic message was, if you look at your business from a technology or product point of view, you are myope. You don't see the full picture. And he took the railway example and said, if you think in a railway company, for example, you think of trains and tracks and so you kind of don't get the point. You have to make it bigger, and it's about getting from A to B or moving people and goods from A to B. That's jobs to be done thinking. So it really opens options for strategy. It also helps to focus investments, which is a very strategic thing. Where you put your resources, we say you only go after underserved jobs. You only go in a strategy after jobs that are not met, not fulfilled, or poorly fulfilled. That's jobs to be done thinking. And you leave away these jobs that are perfectly well fulfilled. We have examples. For example, we worked for a hearing aid company, and the job that hearing aids company basically fulfills, it helps you to hear. Very simple, helps you to hear. And what is especially hard, which job is really not fulfilled, is hearing in difficult noise situations when there is a lot of background noise. So we help this company to focus all the efforts on this very difficult job, hearing in noisy environments, and that informed the innovation strategy, the sales strategy, the marketing strategy. And I think a third impact that jobs to be done can have in strategy is it has alignment power across the organization. We learned that once from a company our sponsor at the company suddenly went up and said, look, before your project, we were debating about how is it in the US and how is it in Asia and how is it in Germany and how is it in France? And we were constantly debating about, in our country, it's different. And now suddenly we have your results, your job to be done results, and we debate about how can we fulfill these needs that we see here on the results. So the discussion has totally changed because the facts are there, and it was clear where are the differences between France and Germany. So for example. So I think that's where jobs to be done can really help in strategy. I would like to have this as a discussion. I have 5 more points to strategy, which I would like to share.
Yeah.
So please jump in, Jim, or anyone who wants to debate. Otherwise, I will just move on.
Yeah, I think you can move on and we'll get some questions. So why don't you take us through your slides?
So I said it's a set of choices. Now, what's a choice? This Roger Martin said, and I agree to this, is that it has to be a choice. So if you have strategy A and strategy B, both strategies have to be a valid choice. If one choice, let's say the opposite strategy, is not a valid strategy, then the first one is also not a strategy. And we have a beautiful example. I mean, many companies follow a customer-centric strategy. Is customer centricity really a strategy? I would argue, and I also ask, okay, if the contrary of customer centricity, is that a valid option for your business to go after? It's okay. But in 90% of the cases, a non-customer centric strategy is not a valid strategy. It's not a valid choice. So for us, customer centricity is often a necessity in many businesses, and it's not really a strategy. Mm-hmm. You have to be customer centric in most of the businesses. There are exceptions. We have some projects where the companies really go after non-customer centric strategies, and there it makes a lot of sense. But most of the time, it's about a choice, but 2 valid choices. I think that's important. I think it's also what we experience very often is that the term strategy and objectives are confused. So a strategy is something to achieve an objective. It's not the objective itself. An objective is a measurable outcome, if you want. It's something that you can measure. It's specific, measurable, ambitious, and serves a purpose. But the strategy is just the way to get there. So very often we see this confusion. So that's the point on choices. We had, for example, a very interesting project on nutrition, and on nutrition we identified 4 different segments with jobs to be done, for different distinct segments which had totally different jobs. It was about convenience food. The job was to feed my family and myself. So to make food or to provide food to my family and to myself. And there were 4 different segments. And one segment was, it was about health. It was the super dogmatic health freak, who was very dogmatic about health. That was one segment. Another segment was the conflicted, very interesting segment. They wanted to cook healthy food, but they could not for various reasons. For example, food was more expensive, or they worked in a place where there was no healthy food available in canteens of companies. So that was the second segment. There was a third segment which was indifferent, and there was a fourth segment which was more flexible. But this company then, it was a meat replacement company. So it was all about health and sustainability. And they deliberately went on not the dogmatic health people, but the indifferent people. The indifferent people who didn't care about healthy food, they only cared about taste. And this meat replacement was only talking about how their meat replacement is better than meat. They made a very bold claim, and they had data to back this up, and basically said better than meat. And with this, they went after the taste segment. The segment who was really, and that was jobs to be done. It allowed the company to make a choice. So that was the point on choices. Next point, I want to share is adoption, market adoption.
Hey, we have a question from
Yeah,
Jason
please.
Hartford. Jason, do you want to come on and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, you said something pretty profound, I thought, and it was just around the customer centricity piece of it, where you said the question was, is customer centricity a valid option? And then you contrasted that with, is non-customer centricity a valid strategy? Sorry, you said not option, strategy. And then I lost what you said after, because it seemed to me that that was a really profound thing, is that companies pursuing customer centricity might be myopic, as in that's what we want to do, but is it really a valid strategy for the environment that they have? And then asking the second question, but I think I missed what you said after, as in, what is, like, how do you resolve that question? Is this a valid strategy?
Well, I would say customer centricity in most cases is just a necessity. If you're not customer centric, if you're not meeting customer needs, you're not in business. So it's not really a strategy, it's a necessity. Sometimes it makes sense to be non-customer centric, makes perfect sense, or even customer adverse. But in most of the cases, you just have to be. Otherwise, you lose in the market. Your strategy will not succeed. Because it's not a valid choice to be not customer centric or not customer oriented.
Oh, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the question of adoption, market adoption. This is somehow a topic that really interests me, because any strategy, any innovation, any new product has to be adopted in the market. I think everyone agrees to this. And if you launch a new product, you ask basically the customers in this market to do things differently. Even if it's a minor change in the product, they have to replace an existing solution with a new solution. That's an innovation. Even if it's a small innovation, a new product, you ask them to do things differently. In other words, you ask them to change a habit. And habit changes are very difficult to achieve. We humans, we don't like habit changes. I learned that in Procter, when we had incremental innovations and on basic products like laundry detergent, and you ask them to change from one product form to another, and say powder to liquid or something. This is a huge habit change, and consumers are really, really sticky. And you have to break this habit change. Why do consumers not like to change? Because I think it's archetype humans. Change means risk, and risk means you might die. So changing is really so. How do you change habit? By really promising more value. That's one way to go. By really promising incredibly more value that is perceived and noticed, that you change. I have this very interesting website, which is called World in Data, Our World in Data. And there you can simulate and you can track how long it took for some basic fundamental technologies to be adopted in the market. The first line is electric power, very unthinkable for us. Electric power. It took about 30 years until electric power was adopted. You can also go to the internet, that's the red line, but the scale is a bit distorted. But if you look at the red line, it took 20 years until the internet was adopted. It will take 20 years until artificial intelligence is adopted. So these curves take this fundamental change, and that has to do with habit change, because people don't change so fast. So you can go there and you can choose different technologies, and you see how long it took until it's adopted. Well, how can JTBD help here in this adoption? Well, it helps to identify imperfections of existing technologies. Let's take the famous Ford quote, Henry Ford quote, if I had asked, they would have done faster horses. Well, first of all, this quote is totally misused because the conclusion of this quote was very often, don't ask the customers what they want. They don't know anyway. We say it's different. Don't ask the customer to improve the horse, but ask the customer, you know, how do you go from A to B? And what happens when you go from A to B? And then you will find out that, okay, going from A to B, it's great. I can do it with a horse, but I have to rest every 20 miles or 30 kilometers because the horse needs food. And I have to organize this food and the water. And I can go from A to B, but I can carry only a limited amount. And sometimes the horse breaks down. And it's polluting the cities. I mean, it's quite stinky, huh? So if you frame it in the jobs to be done way, it helps you to identify imperfections of how a job is fulfilled. Because jobs stay forever. Go from A to B, that's a 3,000, 5,000-year-old job. But the solution to get from A to B, that changes over time. So jobs to be done can help. Car is really an improvement to the horse. It triggered now new problems, and yeah, but that's how it goes. Huh? So that's adoption. It really help. It's really about strategy has to change habits. Habits are very sticky. It's very difficult to change habit, and by providing significantly more value, this can break the habit. That's what we believe in. It's really one way of changing, promising and delivering much more value. Value, I mean, the one who invented the term value proposition said a business is a value delivery system. There was a McKinsey article in the 70s, I think, and he said a business is a value delivery system. It has to promise and deliver value. Only then it's a viable business. But let's think about the term value a bit. What is value? Value is a highly subjective term. Value, it's not an objective value. It is what I think as a person, as a human being, what value it brings to me. And if there is no problem, there is also no value. The other side of the value is the problem. And that's really the unmet need, or the frustrations that I have, or the needs that is at play. So value is subjective. It needs to be understood in terms of what's the problem it solves. And here, jobs to be done can help. Jobs to be done is a great framework to understand the unmet need behind a job, the imperfection that is there to get a job done. It's interesting. We see in many projects that the companies forget about core value that they deliver. They somehow sometimes get sidetracked. Let's take this example of the hearing aid. I mean, it's very clear that the hearing aid has to help hear better in noisy environments. That's very clear. But they forgot, and the innovation pipeline that we found there was all working on making it smaller, making it more ergonomic, making it more convenient. But there were no projects on the list to hear better in noisy environments, which was very surprising. And we work with the product development team. It's actually an Australian company. It's a very old case. You can find it. It's cochlear hearing aid implants. And they said, yeah, but this is clear. That's the holy grail of the industry. We have to find better ways to hear, and also in noisy environment. We know that since a long time. And we said, yeah, but look at your innovation pipeline. If you as a market leader are not working on this, how can you expect to improve? And how would you feel if your competitor finds a way to hear, to solve this problem? And then they really changed the innovation pipeline and worked on projects to gradually improve the hearing performance in noisy environments. And they also did a very quick change in the marketing communication, because it's very interesting that in value communication, there is a bias, a human bias, which we are all being trapped by. It's like we're humans, the more we hear something, the more we start to believe it. And that can be used in marketing. I mean, in P&G, it was a golden rule that you always talk about clean clothes or stain removal. There was no communication where you talked about something else, even if it was about perfume, even if it was the strategic message of clean clothes was always there. And that's also the change that Cochlear did. They immediately started to communicate on value, on listening or hearing performance in difficult environments. Because they said, we are equal in competition. Competition is equal than us, but we talk about it and they don't talk about it. And patients start to believe it. So that's something which I want to share on value and value creation, value strategies. Shall I go on?
Yeah.
We still have time?
Yeah, we have about 5 or so more minutes, yeah.
I have 2 fingers left, so...
Okay, that's good. A couple minutes each finger then.
So we use a value proposition canvas, which is a bit different than what you see in the market. It basically has on the left side the customer perspective, which is the jobs that customers try to get done, and then the pain points and the drama that occur when they try to get these jobs done. In the middle, there is the promise. It's basically a sales story. The promise to basically fix the problem. And then there are the reasons to believe, which is very often about the technology, the features, the evidence of the product, and the call to action. So that's what we use to convey and construct value stories, value selling stories. But the next point I really want to stress, because it's the core of jobs to be done, are these unmet needs. Again, this is a term which is poorly defined in business. The term need is not defined in business. It is defined in psychology, science of psychology. And there it says it's a lack of something and the drive to remove it. It's my popular definition, but it's a need is something lacking and then you want to remove it. So that's the unmet need. And jobs to be done really can help to frame this in the right way. It can help to define the term. So when we define a unmet need in jobs to be done language, we call it a job metric. So it's an expectation that customers, people have to get a job done. And this job metric becomes an unmet need if many people in a target group are not fulfilled with it. So many people find a metric important and are not really happy with the existing solutions. That's for us an unmet need. So we use jobs to be done to define the term. And also what we believe in is that a need has to be very concrete. It's not about some abstract things like convenience or exclusivity or selection or transparency. These are very abstract concepts. We're selling or we're marketing to real people. Even in B2B, we're talking to people, humans. And humans are very concrete. And they don't like to abstract and to conceptualize. They want to hear the problem in a very concrete way. As an example, we did a beautiful project for a car company, and it was about designing the seats. And they said, we want to work with you with jobs to be done, because if you give it to the ergonomic people, those who basically make comfortable seats, we always get the same thing. We want to have a different look at it. How would you frame it from the jobs to be done perspective? And we framed it as get into the car, sit down, start driving, do the curves and brake and all this, stop the car and get out. This was basically the framing of the project. And of course, what do you find when you explore expectations or frustrations to get this job done? Beautiful one, a beautiful insight for guys who get into the car, tend to have the mobile phone in the pocket. They get into the car, and the first thing that happens is the mobile phone falls off the pocket. And where does it fall? Between car seat and console. So a job metric is that an object that you carry in your pocket does not fall between the console and the seat in your car when you sit down. Very concrete need, which happens to everyone on the call. For women, it's a bit different. It's another need. Women tend to carry a handbag. They put the handbag on the passenger seat, and when the first time they brake, it falls off and everything is on the seat. So that's another metric that is relevant for women. So this is unmet jobs to be done can help to make these job metrics. Clayton Christensen calls it hiring criteria. What are the criteria to hire a product? Tony Alvey calls it the outcome. What's the expected outcome when you try to get a job done? We call it metrics, job metrics, or expectation metrics. It's basically the same thing. Everyone defines it a little bit different, the syntax, but it makes really jobs to be done powerful. And the third thing, if it's done the right way, you can measure it. You can really use it in quant research to measure how many people find the metric important and not. So what does that have to do with strategy? It can really help to go after the unfulfilled opportunities in the market. So these fundamental questions that I raised in the beginning: which market do you want to serve? Which customer do you want to serve? How do you want to serve them? It can help to go after the right opportunities. So that's the unmet need. That's how we measure it, but I can go on to the next one. The next one I want to mention is spin. Spin is something that we have discovered over the course of the years that is needed when you move from a solution agnostic jobs to be done phase into the solution phase. At one point in time, corporates have to develop solutions, and product managers, engineers, etc., have to work on solutions. It's very clear. But the beginning of a job to be done project is always solution agnostic. And then there is this transfer into the solution phase. And there we created a special module or special phase. We say now we need to spin either the solution towards the unmet needs, or for unmet needs that there are no solutions, we need to find solutions for it. So it's like almost like a catalytic effort to really make this transfer from solution agnostic to solution oriented. And what we typically do there is we directly translate our metrics into product requirements. So we go from solution agnostic metrics and then phrase specific solution oriented requirements. That's one thing. What we do very often is we call that pain matching. It's like where we create a fit between the unmet needs, the pain points, and the solution idea. And we systematically go through all these ideas and evaluate them and say, how does the solution idea address the unmet needs? It's a very systematic process, which then can help the companies to prioritize. and say, from these 100 ideas that we have, these are the 5 winner ideas. And it also helps to identify white spots, blind spots, where there are unmet needs and no solution ideas to it. We have a beautiful example in the cookware industry. So this company did pots and pans, very luxurious pots, and the paint matching basically prioritized all these ideas, but the most important pain points were not addressed. And the most important pain points when cooking was to clean up. Clean the pots, remove these burnt spots, clean the stove, and then put the pots away. So there were no ideas about this. So basically it was a blind spot, and it triggered a whole new set of product development efforts to make sure that this cleaning is faster, less burn spots, etc. So that's the second thing we do in Spin. And the third thing we do in Spin is we create value propositions as prototypes. So we basically create sales stories before we even develop the product, and then test these sales stories in the market again with real users, and identify basically which of the sales stories are really the strongest. And systematically, we found that if we take the unmet needs that we have found before and put them in the sales stories, and then create a good story about it, we create winner concepts. So that's the third point I would like to share. Of course, there are many more, but I think jobs to be done has a lot to play in strategy. We see, unfortunately, it is done much too little. Many companies delegate product development or innovation down, or to UX, but it should be on a strategic level. And those companies who follow it, they win in the market. I mean, I believe Apple follows a jobs to be done approach, and they are successful. In Procter, we were following jobs to be done approach. We were not calling it that way, but it was jobs to be done. And it's a successful company. So, open for discussion.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. I love these 5 points here: choices, adoption, value, unmet needs, and Spin. I'm going to kick us off with a question, Beat. When you were talking about those blind spots, I'm just wondering why a lot of organizations either find it hard to take a jobs to be done perspective. You talked about jobs to be done thinking, or maybe they just don't know that they should be doing that. And one symptom that I've seen, and I just want to see if you've seen this before too, is that sometimes I think there's a belief that people in the organization can actually predict what the market wants, right? We don't need to talk to people. I've done this job for 30 years. Just ask me what people want, right? And, you talked about being really specific and concrete with the unmet needs. And then in the examples that you gave, you found things that the organization didn't predict were the unmet needs. And I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are. Can a team accurately predict unmet needs, and what role does jobs to be done play in that?
Well, they can they can predict needs that are pain points that are now in the market. That for these jobs to be done is good. I believe you cannot predict pain points that are in the future.
Gotcha.
You can only predict pain points that are now in the market. Pains of today's are the innovations of the future. Customers cannot predict solutions because they're not technical engineers or developers. But I think the real question is, why do companies not embrace this? It has to do with overconfidence and experts. Like companies tend to hire experts, industry experts who have been 20 years in an industry and are experts in the industry, and they don't want to admit that they don't know. They are hired to know. And if they go to their boss and tell them, now we have to do a project or jobs to be done, we have to find out the needs of in our industry, then the boss says, why did I hire you? You're the expert in this, so you know.
Yeah.
Then all the biases come in, the overconfidence, higher paid judgment over lower paid judgment, and all this.
Right.
And many and I think that's the good news of the last 5 to 10 years, is really companies have learned to be a bit more humble and understand that they don't know. I mean, when we started in Vendbridge, it was already a wow that you can talk to customers. This was like 10, 15 years ago. We could, you can talk to customers and they can tell us. Yeah. Today, this is a given. Huh? So this is really design thinking, and all these methods have brought this on the agenda.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word humble, and I think innovation in general, but also jobs to be done in particular, you have to bring a little bit of humility to the table, right? And not think you know the answer. So I think that's a great one. I think for strategy, you need a little bit of humility as well too. And that's why so many innovations fail and so many strategies fail, is I think this overconfidence that you met. But we can get signal from the market, as you were saying with your 5 points, right? And you don't have to be guessing. Good. I really like that. Thanks. I'm going to go to a question from Jose that was asked earlier in the session. Jose, do you want to turn your mic on and ask your question here? You wrote, what do you think is the importance of jobs to be done and the maturity of a business startup versus facing changes in the market?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes, the idea basically is that how do we go about doing this process and doing this finding what is the job to be done between a mature company that already has been operating for 5 or 10 years, and they're facing market challenges, they're losing grip on the market, versus the ones that are just starting and using job to be done, which is normally the ones that I work with, and to define that big share market, for example. And what will be the relation and the difference to apply the job to be done framework?
I think it depends a bit. I mean, young companies, startup companies, they really have to learn. The startup companies I know come mostly from a technological background, and they really have to learn that there is a market out there and they have to sell to this market. And they can apply job to be done as a logic, as a thinking logic. They don't have to do the whole process, but they can really, if they start to embrace the logic of job to be done, then it helps them a lot to reframe their technology and think of their technology as a solution to get a job done. And they move into the customer's shoes, if you want. And for established companies, I would say there are those who are really technologically driven. I see a lot of companies who are technologically driven also, and they just push their technology and then fail very often. And then there are those who understand that if they push the technology and will fail, that they need another level of it. We are working at the moment for a very tech company in the job Stepstone. It's called. It's one of the leading job platforms in the world, number 4 in the world and number 1 in Europe. And they are a technology-driven company, and they just bring out solutions, technology-driven, and they say we will continue to do that, but we need another level. We need to continue to grow. We need this other level of the customer perspective, and enrich our technology approach with the customer perspective, and they have great success with this. So. In our experience, many companies are still not following a job to be done approach, or even a customer focused approach, even a customer centric approach. They have it maybe on their brochures, but they don't do it. They don't listen to the customer. They don't. Human biases are so strong at work. We went into focus groups with clients and we heard totally different things than the client, because the client was just confirming what he always knew, confirmation bias. So he was listening, or she was hearing totally different things than we did. And that's why we in our process, we have mechanisms to unbias, even if our clients come to groups and are listen to. So we really help to open up the eyes for new things.
Mhm.
Does that help, Jose?
Yes. Really help to not only to understand, but because I think really jobs to be done is a concept that's still growing, still maturing, still developing on how it will connect to many different situations. For example, to understand that if it is an umbrella, that it will have so many things underneath, or is it something that you say, for example, the classic case is Walkman. And Walkman discovered that making the music available while you're on the streets, that's a job that they discovered, but they didn't capitalize on it later on. And there's so many things to unpack there, because you're not solving only one thing. You're solving. There are many ranking jobs. For example, there's a main one, but there are many ranking ones for one product at the same time that is going on the market with different market segments also. So it's becoming more and more complicated and more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Thanks.
Look at the comments. I think it was not clear. Can you give an example of a mechanism? Jason asked this mechanism to block a bias. Not sure understanding. I mean, the first step is you have to understand there is bias at work.
Right.
Basic. We are all biased. This is not how do you say? This is just normal human. So there is bias at work. You have to understand what kind of biases are at work. For example, the confirmation bias, and then you need to have the other opinion. I mean, for example, when Jan and I do interviews, we always mirror each other. Jan does the interview, I do the interview, and then we talk about the bias. Mm-hmm. And I have a bias, and Jan has a bias. And bias comes from my life experience, different. So we try to balance it out by having four eyes instead of two. Wow. And quant is a very good way to unbias, because if you ask 200 people and they rate metrics by importance, it's simply a fact. You can say 80% of the people have said this is important. It's not an opinion anymore. It's 80%. You can argue if market research is a good tool, that you can argue, but fact is 80% rated the metric as important. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. That's unbiasing.
Great answer. What I heard there, Jason, was number one, collaboration and working with other people, and two, data. Those are the mechanisms I think that can help you overcome those biases. Excellent. Thanks for that. Elaine, I think Wolfram had a question, right? Let's go to Wolfram.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Bert. Sure. So I just wanted to ask if you mentioned these technology-driven startups as an example, and they actually need to find the problem for their great new idea, which has to be proven still. Do you have a tool, an approach to help them who start in the solution space and need to go back to the problem space to really find the jobs, needs, underserved needs, whatever, to make their new technology or product successful? Because that's the goal. That should be the goal in the end, in my opinion at least.
Yeah, I work a lot with technology-driven startups in search of a market. I mean, they're coming out of the greatest universities in Europe, and very often are really crazy stuff, and they look for a market. And I mean, I always start with the potential customer segment. Who could be a customer who might need this? You have to start somewhere. And very often there are technologies which you don't even know how what value it could potentially bring to whom. So, but there are hypotheses of customers, and then you take these customer segments and then we deconstruct it and say, let's look at we frame it from a jobs to be done perspective, and we have a framing tool which we call the job to be done hierarchy. So basically, we say it's a need hierarchy or a hierarchy of jobs. There are lower level jobs, higher level jobs, and then we start to frame this out as a hypothesis, inside out, no customer discussions, and we discuss this. And then once we have this ready, then we go out with this framing hierarchy to customers, and we test it. And we listen. We know it's a hypothesis. We know it's an assumption. And then we listen carefully to hear that confirmed or not. So that is, for example, I'm now in a robotic company, and the robotic company, they want to do inspections on oil platforms. So it starts already there. Oil platforms. Okay. Who the hell? I mean, it's not the oil platform that buys. Who buys this solution in these oil companies? So you have to find the customer who might buy this solution. Is it the innovation manager? Is it the head of maintenance? Is it the production people? So that's already a first reflection. And then once we zoom in on the maintenance people who have to maintain this oil platform, it becomes for us quite easy, because maintenance, the job of maintenance is always to keep a machine or a factory running, keep it running, and that's one job. What does it involve to keep a oil platform running? This I don't know, but the inspection people know, and then you break it down. And then another job that maintenance people have is it always breaks down. At one point in time, it breaks down. So the job is then to repair, to fix it. That's the job. And then you start to break down and say, what goes wrong? What are the things that go? So that's how we frame it. And that's in a workshop in an afternoon possible. And then you sleep over it and you go to the real people and start to understand if you're right or what language do they use and so on. And that's the tool we use. And that can be done for startups as well.
Is that helpful, Fran?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Excellent. Elaine, did we have any other questions?
No, those were all the questions in the chat, but we had a pretty active conversation earlier around early AI usage and what the market would have been like, when IBM was initially developing it. I don't know if maybe Jan or anybody that had a comment during that section of the conversation. And then we also had a pretty active conversation in the chat as well, related to Jason's question about the unblocking bias.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at the chat if you haven't recently.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now.
Is that a question to Jan on the AI?
Well, I just wanted to, I think when you showed the kind of technology slide, I think the reaction we often get is, well, but like look at AI and how quickly ChatGPT kind of picked up. And I just apparently prompted something when I said, well, AI, at least the field started very early on. So it's at least 50, 60 60 years old, if not more. Of course, it's a different story in terms of what parts of this are really customer facing and so on. But I just wanted to interject that. So even, I mean, we now talk about AI for what, maybe 2 years or so, but that's just, I mean, ChatGPT found a great way of making it accessible, but the technology has been around for 50 years plus, something like that. That's the only comment I wanted to make there. But I'm no way an expert on this. So
I can make a bet. We can make a bet now. And in 20 years, we talk again. If AI has been embraced everywhere, probably it has in 20 years, probably it has in 15 years. But we are already 5 years into the journey.
Yeah, when you talk about adoption, there's this notion of the long nose of innovation. You know, we talk about a long tail, right? But I think it was Bill Buxton kind of coined that term, that any innovation, you'll find the precursors for it that go particularly into universities and researchers, often decades in advance. And I think as innovators, what we want to do is shorten that adoption cycle, right? We want to get to adoption as quickly as possible, because one thing that should be haunting any innovator is, what if nobody needs my solution, right? And I'm wondering, Beat, is there a bias called the innovator's bias? And the innovator's bias is every innovator thinks that they have the greatest thing in the world and people are just going to flock to it instantly. But the history of innovation shows that almost never happens, right? Even with ChatGPT, that there's always this long, slow take up or non-adoption even, right? So the innovator's bias is thinking that your thing is going to be the next, not even ChatGPT. I don't even know anything that's been adopted that quickly, but I tend to see things through the adoption lens a lot. So I'm glad you brought that up today, Beat.
Well, there is an article, a Harvard Business Review article, which is called something like "Stubborn Customer," eager seller, stubborn buyer, something like this.
Yeah.
He never got traction, but he basically says the customer undervalues the benefit that he gets from a new solution and overvalues the change. He talks about the loss of change, and the developer is exactly the other way around.
Opposite, right? Exactly.
Overvalues the benefit and undervalues the amount of change.
Right.
So it's like it's like a triple mismatch.
Right.
And it's understandable. I mean, we work with product managers of huge companies like Siemens, for example, and they are so much in the technology. It's their job to be in the technology. Every day, 99% of their time, even more, is technology, creating some code and creating some solutions. It's absolutely normal. Yeah. But you have to take them out to the normal world.
Well, that's the thing. The real world smacks up against any technology or strategy you have, and very often it's a cold, hard reality that hits you. And Jobs to be Done can help you better navigate that and predict that landscape. I think that's going to be the point we end on today, though, Beat. Thank you so much for bringing your experience and your thoughts to the group.